The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolfe, and co-host Keith Campagna.
Well, welcome back, Googlization Nation. We continue to hope you, your teams, your families are safe, staying healthy, and that you're continuing to practice social and physical distancing. Hopefully not so much social, but at least the physical distancing part. We're trying to get our guest today, which was Rupesh Nair from Symphony Talent. As things go, there's shift always seems to be hitting the plans these days. So hopefully Rupesh will be able to join us. But I've got Keith here. I can't believe it's like, well, it's 1 o'clock Eastern time, and every Wednesday. I mean, this isn't unexpected. This is one of those routine things, Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, that we do every week. Every Wednesday. So, trying to keep some routine in our crazy lives. But this morning, I was actually just a few minutes ago, I was listening to a webinar, as I've been doing a lot, trying to listen to experts, what's going on in our world, trying to keep up on things. The news is just crazy. I actually, I do try to keep up with the news to find out what's going on in our country, but I find it challenging for a lot of reasons. It's very aggravating. But I also, in fact, Tim Draper, for those who might be familiar with Tim Draper, Draper Venture Capital, I'm a super brilliant guy. On kind of what the future looks like. He was saying that you basically just literally lifting your brain out of your head and then giving it to just giving it to TV. You're giving it away, when you watch too much of the news. But, obviously you got to keep up a little bit. But I was listening to Tim and another entrepreneur. It was Leah Sullivan. Who founded TaskRabbit in the last recession in 2008, and what some of the opportunities are there. However, as much as we're talking about a reopening business, getting back to whatever normal is, I'm looking for a better term for new normal if anybody has it. But a couple of things that came up this week that I want to throw out there. I want to get Keith's opinion, and hopefully Rupesh will be able to join us. Certainly there was a fair amount of discussion or conversation around things like Disney, around entertainment, about getting back to work, reopening America, or reopening the world, but reopening these events. What does that look like? I mean, for anybody who's been at Disney World, Disneyland, any Disney event, really any large event, having a lot of people, crowded into a kind of a confined space, waiting for hours to get on a ride, or getting into a concert, or getting into a theater. All those things are sort of up in the air. And the headline was great because it said, "A trip to Tomorrowland may never be the same." And I think that sort of summed up where we were, whether you're talking about Disney or whether you're talking about your business or a local restaurant, going to a concert, going grocery store shopping, going back to work. So that's sort of like the state of where we are. There was a couple things that Tim said, and again, I want to throw this out there because we certainly got a ton of things we can talk about. Tim Draper, and I'm going to end up, when I get the replay of this webinar, I'll certainly post it on my LinkedIn channel. So hopefully you go up there and Twitter, and I'll share that. But his prediction is pretty scary. He's saying his forecast, I won't say a prediction, but his forecast is that for every additional week of our shutdown, we're going to have additional year of recovery. Think about that. For every additional week of our shutdown, we're going to have an additional year of recovery. And he was talking about, the discussion was really about for entrepreneurs, a lot of startups, there's a lot of businesses, a lot of companies just, a lot of companies started their business within the last year and a half or 2 years, and they're looking for new monies to come in. That's why I sort of was excited to talk about Rupesh, because he is a little bit beyond just the last few years, but again, he's in an acquisition mode and looking at that. So I certainly want an entrepreneur's opinion on this. But he was talking that at least from the startup world, they're looking at 3-year recovery period. The plan is if you can make it through the next 3 years, you will survive. Where before it used to be maybe a year and a half of trying to get funding. But I think that every week of a shutdown equals 1 year of recovery is pretty frightening. So Keith, I know you're talking to people every day. You've been like crazy busy. What are you seeing out there? I mean, what do you not from an economic prediction, but what's the mood? What are you finding is going on there?
Yeah, no, totally. And for the record, I in no way, shape, or form going to go toe to toe with a man who has his own investment firm and knows a lot more about that kind of stuff than I do. But in the trenches, it's interesting to see the I'll call, for lack of a better term, our evolution of the mindset. We went from being, as a society, maybe even a world, glued to the TV to figure out what was going on. And then everyone went out and bought toilet paper. And now people are starting to move back away from the TV because they're recognizing that, oh, by the way, it's springtime. And I'm with my family, and whether or not the family members are getting on each other's nerves, the idea of going out and separating from technology seems to be coming up more and more. Yesterday, my good buddy Mark Bresci and his company Ultimate Software had Simon Sinek on for a live webcast. And Simon certainly knows a lot about what it takes for businesses to see through the short term. And, even with a lot of the CEOs I've been talking with, the term that keeps coming up is adaptability, and I'll give you a good example. I was talking with a buddy of mine, David Nason. He'll be on the show in a few weeks, maybe a few months. He's I think 4-time entrepreneur, and he was telling me about a company that he's helping out with. He's advising, and it's a bunch of 20-year-old guys out of college who put together a drone business, literally in startup mode. And what these drones do is clean the outside of buildings, right? So here they are, they're trying to develop use cases, and they're trying to establish some sort of investment stream. And the coronavirus comes into place. So what was the first thing after they got all nervous and after they got all sorts of unsure of what to do next? The common sense or maybe just creativity takes over, and the idea is, go get your licensing to become a disinfector. So now they're talking to agencies inside of the New York, general area, talking about how they can use their drones to disinfect public places, to disinfect hospitals, exterior, all sorts of new ideas come out of it. And I think that's going to be what starts to take place. I think there are way too many entrepreneurs with the entrepreneur spirit to just sit back and become the victims. They're going to start feeling more creative because the stress levels are going to drop. And now we're going to start to see, hopefully, a resurgence in new ideas. And even when I heard you tell me about, I'm sorry, the guy's name escapes me. Who were you just referencing? The investment guy?
Tim Draper. Tim Draper. Right.
I wonder what assumptions are inside of that 1 week equals 1 year, because, we've been talking about this for a while now, right? The pace of technology is such a strong advantage where if you're using it the right way, you can start a company up, get the ball moving, and it could be in something you totally didn't see coming because everything's changed.
No, exactly
So,
right. And I certainly can't get inside Tim Draper's head, just as I can't get inside Simon Sinek's head. We'd like to. We'd like to be able to be able to capture all that. So, we listen to them and we learn from them, and they help us talk about things, think about things in different ways. I can't say just thinking about things, but thinking about things in different ways. Tim, by the way, and I don't know if he's the largest venture capital in the country, or what the status is from a rank. He's probably one of the most famous. He's got the Draper Foundation, and in the startup entrepreneurial world, he's certainly one of the most respected individuals that are out there. I mean, he's incredibly successful. So from that regard, at least from that investment side, he's certainly someone that you want to listen to. And again, not, Simon Sinek's fantastic, but I don't agree with all of his perspectives either. But it helps you create your own, and it helps you get in that right direction. So again, I'm not. I don't know how he came up. He didn't talk about how he came up with that in there, other than he said it took us almost 100 years to build up this economy. And obviously we've had some peaks and valleys and ups and downs, and even in our lifetime, some people think I'm that old, but I wasn't around for the first depression. And I don't even remember. I mean, I was around for the depression in the 50s, or recession in the 50s. I was around for the 60s, the ups and downs in the 70s, and the oil crisis, and so I do remember some of those instances, but those were somewhat like cyclical, and I think this is an important distinction that, and for sure, and anybody who's been listening to me, as we talk about the exponential curve, and as I say it facetiously now, that prior to this, it sort of was like an academic discussion of what an exponential curve was. And now you can ask probably any 3-year-old, and they would give you a pretty good description of what an exponential curve is, and what acceleration of a technology or acceleration of change looks like. So fortunately, not fortunately, but by any means, but the coronavirus pandemic certainly introduced a new term and put it in everybody's vernacular, and anybody can discuss it, as I said, all the way probably down to a 3-year-old. But as they're talking about this, that exponential curve, of changing, behind the scenes, and this is where I think you were headed, with that entrepreneurship, and it would be interesting to have Tim Draper on this on a call like this, of figuring out where that came from. The challenge with it is where it is. Although we are flattening the curve in most places for the coronavirus, for the COVID-19, we're not flattening the curve. And I'm not sure how we would even do it for the technology curve, what we were talking about 8 weeks ago, and what my book's about, and what a lot of people have been talking about. That technological curve, that exponential curve, which was accelerating at an incredible rate of speed, is not flattening. It's not going away. And in fact, it's probably accelerating from this. So where before having drones, disinfect a building was, we don't want that many drones in the air. Now, right, it's the solution. The same thing is Tim was talking about, and again, I wish I was trying to get ready for the show, and I was saying, oh, darn, this was on like at noon, and I'll listen to it for a few minutes, and we were right up to like 12:50. Even when you called me at like 12:35, I was still listening to it. Part of it is he was talking about all these new opportunities that are coming out like that. He didn't mention, that drone, but, that other opportunities. But he was talking about Bitcoin, if you asked anybody a few months ago, about what do you think about Bitcoin? Oh, it's all these regulations, and look, it went up to it was like up to 17,000. It was valued at like 17,000 a Bitcoin a few months ago, and then it crashed. And if you talk, we had guests on the show, and we talk about blockchain, which is what Bitcoin is based on. We won't get. I don't know enough to talk about it in depth, but the technology was called blockchain. And, we talk to people. What do we think about that as far as payment for HR, for payroll, because it does add an incredible layer of security. There is a big rush to that. And a lot of these banks, where now that the value of our dollar is going to be cut substantially because we're pouring $2 trillion at a shot into the economy. So we basically devalued with that. I mean, with a $20 trillion economy and a $2,000 injection, we basically reduced the cost, like 10%, and there's more money than that, but they're projecting like a 20% devalue. That people are starting to look at Bitcoin as a not only as a currency, but now that there's been this rush into data, of collection of data, I'm sort of, and I'm rambling because I got like a billion thoughts going in my head. But again, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 6 months ago, whole lot of discussions about technology companies tracking our data, about being able to identify where we are with the GPS. Now they're talking about leveraging that technology to look how well social distancing's working, physical distancing. What's the movement? They were able to track the kids the students that were on spring break in Florida just a month ago. Seems like an eternity ago. Just a month ago, that they dispersed. They were able to track where they dispersed to, and did a hotspot, did a new infection develop. So, but all of a sudden, all these concerns about data and privacy they're not going away, but there's going to be this acceleration of technology to leverage that. And then the next step is how do we do that without compromising all our individual privacy?
Right. And that right there is going to be where it gets really sticky, because there's so much value. Like, I think what was missing in the conversations a few months ago, Ira, certainly wasn't really included all that much, was the need for the kind of technology that would create, for lack of better terms, create this kind of constant monitoring of activity. People just couldn't really fathom, or at least, unless maybe, I'm sure, former guest Frank Diana was the futurist, certainly had conversations about what would cause people to become data points. And I think there's something to be said for the need for technology inside of the business world. We've certainly have been guest week after week, guest after guest. We talk about the value of, artificial intelligence and emotional intelligence. And we also talk about how in the HR world, most HR organizations are behind the times. And now here we have it, right? Now they're completely behind. We talked about this, right? How, let alone the exponential growth of using technology means that if you don't use technology and somebody else in your industry or somebody else in your building does, and if they use it the right way, they're going to be able to attract your employees. They might be able to attract your customers. And now you're looking like it's legitimate right now. A lot of the companies I'm talking to, I'm talking to sales leaders, right? The ROI shop is becoming a much more relevant conversation, because in order to get the economy going, in order to get your business going again, people are going to need to buy and sell things. And so fortunately for me and Mike, we're in a position where we're getting a lot more of attention than we have been in the last, say, quarter or two. But the truth of the matter is that people are recognizing that they do not have technology in place. I mean, I was talking to a company where they do corporate visions. They're one of the world leaders for sales trainings. And I'm talking to the chief strategy officer, and he told me point blank, Keith, there's so much I want to talk to you about with the ROI shop, but for the next 2 months, we're moving everything to digital. Everything's going online, which is that could have been a 6-month, 12-month project in the past. Now it's a 2-month project because there's no other options. And then if you cascade that into the education field, into any real business model where there are companies that didn't supply their employees with laptops.
Right.
So think about all the IT infrastructure that now has to get put into place. And, how does a company take a desktop, take it home, right? You tell all your employees to take the desktop home. You have to go back and figure out all of the IT infrastructure, and you might not have the capital coming in. You might not have the cash flow right now to actually do that correctly. So now we're seeing a resurgence in IT needs and IT demands. And going back to Draper's point, where's the money going to come from?
Well, absolutely.
It's incredible.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a concern, and I'm not, I'm not an economist, and I'd love to, for anybody who's out there that is either listening and wants to do a follow up with that, I'd love to have a continued conversation about what some of the impacts of this, is in the long term, and there's certainly everything from we're going to have a in fact, Tim even mentioned that they're expecting this quarter we're going to have a 40% contraction in our economy. 40%. That's going to be the largest contraction since 1930s, which was the Great Depression. Which started in 29. But on the other hand, and this is the interesting part. I wish I had a huge, large portfolio, in my retirement, but I don't. But I do have some, and certainly a couple. I've lived through a couple of these cycles, and unfortunately, silly me, in some of the early ones, I'd panic, and it's like, oh, I'm going to get the money out because it's going to be a long time, and then I'll be able to time it when it goes back, And of course, I missed pulling it out before the fall. And I got in too late, a lot of times just waiting for it. So that's a really bad strategy for anybody listening to be out there. So I have learned, into 6 decades of life, I learned to sit tight. But it's interesting because yesterday, and again, this goes day by day, I think there's still going to be some really bad days ahead, but that's my opinion, and you can take that what it's worth. That's not investment advice, by the way, but my feeling is that's what's going to happen, that there'll be another opportunity or two to get a low. But I looked at some of my stocks, and some of them, for basically an older baby boomers portfolio are pretty heavy in tech. And I looked at some of these, and they dropped significantly. I mean, we're talking lost 40% of value just a few weeks ago. They're at near their all-time highs. And I'm not talking Amazon. I'm talking about when all this hit, everybody thought like 5G investment, which really was going to 2020 was going to be the year 5G. And we've heard people talk about that is going to really accelerate mobility and technology. And every one of the stocks that I had that was sort of betting on 5G sort of crashed. I mean, significant. I mean, stocks were $100. They were now worth 50. Stocks were, I had a stock that was worth like $450 a share, and they dropped to the 200s. Yeah. They're all back to all-time highs, despite the fact that we're still have all this horrible news. We're not open yet. So to your point is, there's a lot of optimism, and there is somewhere there are people investing because, and again, it's always said that only 50% of the country owns any, has a retirement plan, and even only 20% actually, or I don't remember if it's 20%, but it's a pretty low number, have investments in stocks. So there's certainly a 60, 70% of the population that this does not pertain to. But there is money pouring into these technologies.
Yes. And interestingly enough, we must have struck a nerve because the chat line just blew up, right? And, when we talk, for those of you listening to us, whether or not you're a repeat listener or not, we are not your financial advisors. What we do talk about is how one element of the future of work may disrupt or, change for the better another. And the truth of the matter, Ira, is that, I think what people are witnessing is the shift of money and the shift of value in those technology stocks really simply reflects the exodus of brick and mortar type investments. And, a good friend of mine is in commercial real estate finance. I mean, right now, again, at the risk of sounding like somebody who's not trying to sound pessimistic, but if you just look at what's going on, right? People are now not driving and commuting to the office. So there is a chunk of people that might not need to live in a city. They might move away. And if they move away, what happens to all those shopping centers? There's already been talk about turning like what they call like third tier cities. Like instead of it being a shopping mall, there might be a residential park where apartments are built and restaurants are there. So it's almost like mini cities are now going to be the future. So I think when it comes to investments, first and foremost, do not listen to anything that me or Ira share. But, it might
we wouldn't be, if we were, we'd be doing a financial advisory show, not a Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show, right?
But I think there's something to be said about there never being an opportunity like there is now because of the way technology is going to skyrocket in so many more capacities than ever before. Because we simply, as a company, as a world, we didn't have the options. And now we do. And
we are up to a break. Amazing. So, and still have a ton of things that we're talking about. If anybody has any questions or has opinions that, a different perspective, some advice other than financial advice. We don't want to turn this into that. But if you have an outlook on our economy, on the recovery, if you agreed or disagreed on what we were saying, you can call us at 561-623-9429. 561-623-9429, or you can join us on the chat at w4cy.com. But you're listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. I'm with my co-host, Keith Campagna, today. Unfortunately, it looks like our guest wasn't able to make it. So we're going to take a short break. We're going to hear from our sponsors, Zor.ai and Success Performance Solutions. So stay right where you are. We'll be right back.
Hi everyone, this is Ira Wolfe, author of Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. I'm excited to announce that my online course, Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter, is open for business. This course is the culmination of a 2-year-long project and releases recruiting tips I've learned after hundreds of hours of research, speaking with thousands of conference attendees, and interviews with dozens of experts. It's all available to you in Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter. To receive more information or get started, visit our website at www.successperformancesolutions.com and click on the tab, Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter.
Imagine how your company would grow if your candidate experience earned a 99% approval rating. Well, to get to 99%, you need the 3 best letters in recruitment technology, XOR. Zor's text bots, chat bots, and audio bots increased IKEA's candidate conversion rate 455%. Zor decreases candidate drop-off rates, improves your candidate experience, and collects analytics for future strategies. To learn more, check out Zor.ai. That's XOR.ai.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, and Googlization Nation, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. I'm your host, Ira Wolfe. I'm here with my co-host, Keith Campagna, and we are doing what a lot of people are doing these days, ad-libbing. we had a great guest, and hopefully he'll be able to join us in a future. Rupesh Nair from Symphony Talent. For some reason, Rupesh was not able to make it, which is understandable because the shift is hitting a lot of people's plans. But Keith and I have been having a great conversation about we're doing a lot of catching up since we haven't had a lot of opportunity to do that. I've been crazy busy. My productivity, despite, this is my heyday. I told somebody the other day, they talked about how am I adapting, and I said, no, the world is adapting to my lifestyle now. How about it? Yeah, this is what I've done. Well, and you've done for a while, but especially the last year, working remote. Certainly we had opportunities to go out and do conferences and have face-to-face meetings, but most of our world was remote. So anybody who has been working remote before, this is, the world adapted. The shift, the adaptation was to us. And I'm sort of a sponge. I've always been curious and like listening to things, but there's a lot of people that are out there that didn't have the time to do this. Like we were talking earlier about, Simon Sinek's always done that, but Tim Draper, but everybody is online. Everybody is sharing information. People who are, sometimes we do it, and as a consultant and as a thought leader, sometimes we just do it to talk to people, to talk things out, because you can read all you want, but then your head gets kind of mush. With all these different perspectives and all this new information. So I've been doing, a ton of live streams. I know you Keith, I've got, you and I got scheduled. That was the only way to get on each other's books, other than the show for next Monday. So we'll talk about that. But yesterday I had a great live stream with a friend of mine. It was funny. We did a live stream, which was video. Obviously the audio, our podcasts are all audio, but I did a video with Ed Gordon. Ed has written 21 books on the future of work, future of labor, what skills are going to be needed. He wrote his first one in 1991, so it's almost 30 years later. And he's got 21 books out, hundreds of articles. He's taught, more of an economist, academic, but I interviewed him yesterday. And although I've known him and we've communicated quite often since early 2000s, almost at 20 years. First time we ever actually saw one another. We spoke on the phone, but we never did a Zoom call, before. And it wasn't actually Zoom. I was using StreamYard, my streaming software. But we never did a call. So it was like actually the first time we actually met. So, despite all this disruption and people are talking about the loss of social contact, I think there's a lot of people that are talking face to face for the first time, even if it's on a screen.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll go. Look, I'll peel that back one more layer and think about the way families are getting together. I myself, for Easter dinner, we made our meal. My parents made their meal. My sisters made their meals, and we all Zoomed together, and it was awesome. We were laughing. We were talking over each other like we would do if we were sitting at the table. And we were joking about how this is almost better because I could still drink a few glasses of wine at dinner and I don't have to worry about driving home.
Yeah. So you wonder if that's going to change. So I don't celebrate it as I did when I grew up and as a kid. But I know Passover, started Wednesday night, the first night of Seder. And there's a couple groups I was in. One of them's Shelley Palmer, and he was a super big tech guy, and he actually was training people how to set up a remote Seder, a digital Seder using Zoom. How you do that. But we also did on Sunday. We had Jerry's family that we arranged a call. And unfortunately, her dad was not able to be on it because he doesn't have wireless and he's not, using a computer. But her nieces, her sisters, nieces and nephews were on the call, And as we said, right in the middle of the call, one of them said, this is just like normal. Everybody's talking at the same time over one another. And then, a couple of people just sort of left the room. I mean, the camera was on, but they left. And that seems to happen. People, leave the table and they go, especially if it's on a holiday where there's sports, any games, somebody left and watched something. Somebody was in another conversation. So people were sort of, it was a new normal, but everybody sort of fell into it, pretty quickly.
How about this one? How's this one in terms of things that I'm seeing happen, I'm participating in, and it almost solves a problem that we had in the past? And that's to say, I was invited well before the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. I was a co-host for a fantastic radio show out of Philadelphia called Executive Leaders Radio. Herb Cohen and Rachel Blumenthal, I think I just pronounced her name correctly. They've been doing it for, I think, 14 years now. And this goes back to my ADP days. And I was invited to get onto a little bit of a brainstorming conference call yesterday because what Herb sees is an opportunity. It's all about leaders. It's all about, organizational development. And what Herb was trying to figure out was how can we still keep entrepreneurs, young and old, connected? And so, we started talking and there was, there's C-levels from some of the largest law firms in Philadelphia. There are entrepreneurs. There were 7 of us on the call. And what came up was, one of the things that came up was how hard it is, or how hard it was, or maybe even better said, how much harder it was to connect somebody who was in their 60s at a company with somebody who was in their 20s. Because mostly the older generation thinks that the younger generations aren't listening, and the younger generations think that the older generations are going to tell them what to do all the time. But now, because there's this X factor of wanting to be connected, because we've pulled apart, it's easier to put together a group that's there to share ideas, that's there to, like you said, just talk and connect. And we both know that when you sit down and you connect with people, that's where the magic happens. So it's almost like this barrier that was there based off of different personas. It's kind of dissolving away, and it's opening up that opportunity for more, collective conversations that might spark even better ideas.
So, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it just, I had a lot of other questions, but I this was a real important one that was coming up. So I agree. I mean, that's a great point of how do we connect, somebody in their 60s with somebody in their 30s. And that was, mentoring up and mentoring down. And there's been a lot of problems. And how do you get baby boomers and millennials and Gen Z to talk to one another and all that sort of stuff? This is beyond that. So a lot of people talked about the loss of personalization. This is too technical, and it doesn't feel the same. Some of that, I totally believe, is just because we're uncomfortable. There's a lot of people that are uncomfortable with, talking on video. The other thing, though, is that if you're on video, you have to pay attention to the other person. You can't, if you're in a meeting, how many people are checking their texts, checking their emails? They're distracted, they're sleeping. You've seen it all. I mean, you've been in a ton of meetings face to face. Because you're in the same room doesn't mean that everybody's connected or listening or paying attention or being aware. Everybody's sort of got their agenda and doing other things. When you're on video, it's hard because you need to be focused. And I've heard a lot of people say that they feel they're more exhausted now doing 3 or 4 Zoom, and we'll use Zoom generically, like Kleenex, a Zoom call, than they were when they were working 10 and 12-hour days. Because
they have
to be paying attention.
I've been rocking and rolling with the ROI shop now for about 3 months. When the coronavirus hit, I was generally used to starting to lose my voice come Friday morning. And now here we are, it's midweek, and my voice is already starting to get strained. Like, it's nonstop. And that ties into the future of work like we were projecting it. We talk about how technology and productivity play hand in hand. Now people are going to be working from home. Well, how do you get productivity out of someone working from home? You got to use technology. Now that you're using technology, now you have data. Now you can legitimize what your expectations are. You can work maybe a 35-hour work week. As long as your productivity metrics are met, you can take off half of a day if you want to. And that lends itself to more of a life-work integration model versus a work-life balance model, right? So there's like all of these underlying connections that are sitting there to be exposed. And, you know, another thing that I was
Keith,
thinking
before I lose this thought, because this is where I wanted to go before. Let me think about this, because I think this is what we're going to be picking up on Monday, as well with your live stream.
Yeah.
So there was this whole thing that if you worked from home, you couldn't be as productive. And there's for people working from home, there are challenges because they got kids and they got two spouses competing for the kitchen table and the internet and the broadband, because this came upon us abruptly. But once we settle down, once we get comfortable and people figure that out, do you think, or what's your feeling on this, is that working from home is going to be maybe more productive than going back to work? And here's why I say that. When a business reopens, there's going to be a delay that you're going to have to go and you're going to have to wait in line to have your temperature taken. You're going to put on protective gear. You're not going to be able to have meetings in the same room. There's going to be at a distance. So then, even at work, is it going to be more convenient to do a Zoom call, even though everybody's in the same building? It's going to take longer to get to work, because if you stop and get gas and you wanted to get coffee, basically everybody's either going to be drive-through now, or what happens when you go to a convenience store or a Starbucks to pick up the coffee, but you have to have 6 feet between everybody and the lines are longer. I mean, there are going to be delays that people haven't even thought about. So does productivity actually working from home become better than going to work?
Yeah. How about retention? How about the cost of doing your job? Like, to have somebody commute to work probably costs the company a couple $1,000s a month.
Or it comes out of their pockets. It comes out of people's pockets. I think we saved, and I don't even commute to work. I mean, my commute to work is down a couple flights of steps. But the reality is I just looked at my credit card, and well, part of it is because we're not going out every weekend to eat and movies and things. But I put in $200 of gas, running back and forth to the gym, eating, running around, going, running to the airport, running to a conference, going to a meeting somebody for lunch. I think I have 100 miles on my car in the last 7 weeks.
Right.
So all of a sudden is if I had to go back to work, I might say, I either need an increase in pay or, I don't need to go in 5 days a week anymore.
Right.
But I think just on all the distractions and the disruptions, I don't think people have thought through this yet of is it going to become more productive to do a Zoom meeting with people all in the same building than it is to call them into the same room and everybody throws on their protective gear and sits 6 feet apart. Right. And then you take it to the account that, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Jason Cochran about how, on the initial introduction to what we're all experiencing right now, there's a lot of stress. And when your mind is in a stressed kind of a place, you're not in a position to be creative. You're not in a position to be collaborative. And so now that stress has kind of waned a little bit, people are settling in. And so at a minimum, we're hitting one of those cycles where you're stressed, like maybe in mass society, maybe the globe, everyone's stressed, but now everybody's relaxing. And they're starting to see that it might not be the worst thing in the world. We're starting to see people spend less time online,
spend more time with the people that they live with. Who knows how many babies are going to be born 10 months from now, right?
Yeah.
It's
sure.
incredible to think that, one, nothing is going, very, very few things are going to be the same as they used to be. But number two, nobody's really sure what it's going to look like, which I can't remember the last time that took place.
Yeah. Well, I think in each instance it did, but we sort of lived on that cycle that things ebbed and flowed, and then they changed a little bit. Everything, including the very nature of our economy, was collapsed. So, if there was a tradition, it's been violated and changed and adapted, and some of those will come back, but they will be different or in a different context. So it's going to be changed. So, you started out, I think one of your early comments talked about a mindset. And, I posted that article that I found, and it was actually a quote in the book. So I can verify that on page 92, I said this, I wrote this 3 years ago. And I wrote a couple rules, but I think that the final message on this, which sort of reiterates what you just said, is number one on my list of rest in peace to the way it was, is there is no going back. If anybody thinks that we're going back to normal, you're pretty much kind of, I don't know what the word is, but it's just not going to happen. The second is that anything and anyone could become obsolete at any time, and that sounds pretty vicious, and it sounds like horrible, and to think about it, but it's true. And it doesn't mean that we die. It just means that whatever kind of the context in which we lived in and the mindset that we had, we need to change that. We need to adapt, and as we were just talking, that digital world. Working from home, well, no, it can't be as productive as it was, but now going to work may not be as productive as it was, definitely will not be as productive as it was.
Right. On Monday, shameless plug, but I'll go for it since it's our.
That was my cue up, so go ahead.
It's like 11 o'clock Eastern time. LinkedIn Live, Ira and me, we're gonna talk about the ROI of making business happen. A lot of the conversations I'm having right now has to do with adapting a sales process into this new world environment. Mm-hmm. And so, there's the idea that your sales reps may never be welcomed inside someone else's business again. So how in the world are you going to make that connection? What kind of collaboration can you do? Mm-hmm. And how, if you're somebody trying to buy technology right now, or anything else for that matter, how are you going to quantify the business impact of that purchase? Because, and this isn't me because I'm one of the guys at the ROI shop, but if your business proposal to buy something does not include how you make or save your company money, your CFO for the next 2 quarters at least is probably not going to approve your project. So join us live Monday, 11 o'clock Eastern. That's 8 a.m. on the West Coast. And I'm going to talk about some of the people I've had one-on-ones with, some of the sales leaders that I've talked to, and some ideas about how to survive better than you thought you could these next couple quarters.
Yeah, and we're going to have that out on reminders beginning either late today or tomorrow on LinkedIn and Twitter. It will be broadcast simultaneously on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. So you can join that, and then there'll be a replay in case you do miss that, but it'll be out there. A couple other things I'm doing, as I said yesterday, I did a great live stream with Ed Gordon. You want to hear about that because we were talking about what's going to happen with job skills, the future of jobs. What's going to happen going forward. Friday, I'm talking with Ed Siegel. I got his book right here. It just came, so I got to do a quick read. It's called Crisis Ready. It's a brand new book, but it talks about 101 ways to prepare for, which we're a little bit past that, but prepare for and bounce back from disasters, scandals, and other emergencies. So we're gonna focus on how do we bounce back, how do businesses bounce back from that. Monday, I've got you, Keith, on live stream. And we'll be back next week with Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization with another show. Can't remember. It's one of your guests. Is it Keith Katani? Does that name ring a bell?
It could be.
Yeah, not sure. So yeah, you just watch for that. We'll have that out there. And I just want to say everybody can mark the calendars for this on April 30th. I'm doing another live stream. It's going to be 1:30 in the afternoon. We're going to have Mike Clark back from Gallup. I'm going to have Lee Andress, who is a really she's a ball of fire on talking about the future of HR and the future of work. We're going to have her, and I'm also having Lance Hahn, who is the new editor of ERE and TLNT. So we're going to have that, and hopefully, Keith, you'll be able to join us on that. We're going to have a panel discussion about what's happening up in the future. And there we've had it. I guess we need to wrap up here really soon. For those who are not subscribed to Geeks Geezers, not Geeks and Geezers, but Googlizationnation.com. Go to Googlizationnation.com and you'll get updates about all these events and some other things that we got planned. Certainly, hopefully you're subscribed on podcasts to Geeks, Geezers, Googlization, or you go to our website, geeksgeezersgooglization.com. I want to thank, again, Zor.ai and Success Performance Solutions for helping us be on the air, for being our sponsors. And join us next week, Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, W4CY.com. You can now get some of our shows. We're putting them up there. It's also on YouTube. So you can go to youtube.com/Ira Wolfe. And we're starting to put some of these shows up on YouTube as well. So until next week, this is Ira Wolfe and Keith Campagna. Don't let the shift hate your plans.